Hello, my name is Kedrick McKenzie. Today I'm going to be giving a presentation on gluten intolerance and how that affects people and affects humans. Today I really want to paint a picture of what gluten intolerance is, and to do that we're going to look at the background. What is gluten intolerance? How does it affect people? And what are the different kinds of gluten intolerances? Then we're going to look at the symptoms, what signs show that you have gluten intolerance, and the treatment options. And then we're going to look at life with gluten intolerance and some of the scientific views of life with the gluten intolerance problem. So first, in order to understand gluten sensitivities, we have to quickly understand what gluten is. In a nutshell, gluten is a protein found in wheat and other wheat relatives, so it's also found in barley and rye, etc. It is what gives dough that elastic and spongy quality. It's responsible for that, and it also plays a role in the rising process of bread dough. So it's an intrinsic part of wheat, and it is common in all bread products. There are three different types of gluten sensitivities, and we're going to quickly look at all three of these. These are not new. These have been around for a very, very long time. In fact, a Greek physician wrote in the 1st century about one of these disorders, about celiac disease, and so it's been around for thousands of years. There are three big ones, and we're going to look at those each individually. First up is celiac disease, then a wheat allergy, and last is non-celiac gluten sensitivity. Two of these are actual intolerances, and then the wheat allergy is an actual allergy, but we're going to look at these because it's in that umbrella of gluten problems. First up is celiac disease. This is the bad one. Celiac disease is an autoimmune disorder. So what that means is that when someone who has this disorder ingests gluten, the body begins attacking itself. There are, lining our small intestines, hair-like or finger-like projections called villi. That's a picture of the healthy villi. There are lots of gaps. They're very extended. They're long. But what happens is when someone who has celiac disease eats this, the villi misinterpret the signs from the gluten and begin attacking each other. And instead of absorbing the helpful enzymes off of the gluten, they absorb the harmful ones. And this causes long-term serious damage. That's a picture of some healthy villi. This next picture is some villi that has experienced what's called villus atrophy, the villi attacking itself, and that flattens them out, and over the course of time, the villi are degraded until there is nothing there, and the small intestines are smooth. That causes long-term effects that doesn't go away, and it's very, very serious, and it opens door to other serious health problems in the future. It used to be you couldn't diagnose celiac disease until you got an intestinal biopsy, which is serious, but then some other medical journals have found out that there are easier ways of doing it, counting and looking at the enzymes or testing for villus atrophy. Those are all ways of diagnosing this. The next sensitivity is a wheat allergy, and this is not a gluten intolerance. We're going to talk about this very briefly just because it falls under gluten problem, but it's not an intolerance. There is no villus atrophy occurring. The body is not attacking itself, so this is not an autoimmune disorder. What's happening is the body is mislabeling gluten as an enemy and attacking the gluten. So the body's not attacking itself, it's attacking the gluten and not digesting that properly. And that's what goes on in the wheat allergy. We're not going to talk about this anymore. I just wanted to present it to you so you know there are other wheat and gluten sensitivities, but this is, again, is not a gluten intolerance. The last intolerance, and this is the big one, is non-celiac gluten sensitivity. A lot of people suffer from this, and there's not a lot of scientific evidence figuring out what exactly it is. There's still a lot of unknowns. First of all, it's not an autoimmune disorder. What we most likely think is that it is an innate immune response. So what that means is the first line of defense in our immune system does not hold the memory of how to break down gluten successfully. So it's not successfully digesting the gluten and doesn't break it down the right way. And that causes the symptom that's very painful, but there's none of the villus atrophy occurring. It's not really harming itself the same way someone with celiac disease has. But this is very serious. 6 times as many people with celiac disease suffer from non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So a lot of people have this disorder. And roughly 7% of the population have a gluten intolerance. And out of the 7%, 1% has celiac disease, and again, 6 times that, 6% of the population of America have non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So that's a lot of people. 7% is a lot. It may not look like a lot, but it's a big amount of America who have gluten intolerances. So, and they have to deal on a daily basis with the symptoms of gluten intolerances. Because these are gastrointestinal problems, a lot of the symptoms are the same. people who have celiac disease or non-celiac gluten sensitivity suffer from a lot of the same ailments. And real quickly, 3 of the big ones are diarrhea, gas, and constipation, all digestive problems. There are lots of other symptoms, a long list of them, but those are the 3 big ones. There are also some very specific ones that only people with celiac disease have, and only people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity have. And those are fatigue, if you have celiac disease. And that's because of the autoimmune disorder aspect of it. The body's attacking itself, and so it's spending energy having to recover from that, and that results in you being tired. And then a study in 2012, so a very recent one, examined people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity and found out a lot of them suffer from headaches and joint pain. And that is something that is not found in people with celiac disease. So there are also non-gastrointestinal problems and non-gastrointestinal symptoms. So again, the symptoms are the same, a lot of them, and there are a few very specific ones. So you have the symptoms, you think you have it, you get tested, you do have it. What are the treatment options for someone who has celiac disease or for someone who has non-celiac gluten sensitivity? Sadly, the only cure we have right now is a gluten-free diet. That is the only treatment that we can offer to people who have gluten intolerances. That's because we haven't figured out a way to get the body to stop attacking gluten the way it does. And so the best way to do it is to just avoid ingesting gluten forever. And that's very, very difficult. That's very, very hard. And the next thing we're going to look at are the effects on daily life that celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity and a gluten-free diet have on people. A study done in 2003 examined 253 people with celiac disease and asked them the negative implications it had on life. Out of those over 200 people, 82% said it impacted travel and vacation time, 67% said it impacted time with family and friends, and 41% said it had a negative implication on work. And that's a lot of people saying this really causes them to have problems with their daily life, that their disorder gets in the way of them functioning normally because they accidentally eat some gluten or they can't find the gluten-free option, so they eat something that has gluten and they get very, very ill. They still suffer from those symptoms. So this has a big impact on daily life. Another very interesting thing is that if you have celiac disease and you don't strictly stick to a gluten-free diet, you're opening the door to other health problems down the road. People with celiac disease are much more likely to contract schizophrenia, seizure, and anxiety disorders, and migraine. And those are just 4 I took from a very long list in a research document. So if you do not stick to a gluten-free diet, you're opening the door to very serious side effects down the road. Now that we've looked at the effects on daily life, let's quickly look at a gluten-free diet. In a nutshell, the name speaks for itself. Gluten-free diet is one that does not have any gluten. But remember, that includes not just wheat, but barley and rye and other relatives. Also, gluten has a way of being in products we don't think it's going to be in. It's obvious gluten isn't in rolls or crackers or a loaf of bread. But there's also gluten found in soups, in chili, in like salsa for your chips. It's found in a lot of things, and so it's very prevalent. And it's very difficult for people with gluten intolerances to go through their life without ever eating any gluten, ever. Another interesting fact is that people with these gluten disabilities, so people with celiac disease and non-celiac gluten sensitivity, aren't covered under the Americans with Disabilities Act. And what that act means is that it forces restaurants, schools, other public organizations to have alternative food options for people with things like lactose problems or diabetes, but it does not force organizations to provide gluten-free options. So if your child goes to school and they ask for the gluten-free option, the school is not required to give them one. And that's something that's very interesting, also very difficult for that 7% of our population who suffer from these disorders. Another very interesting thing is a research document published in 2012 and then a follow-up response in 2013 examined the effect of a gluten-free diet on people who don't have gluten intolerances. And what they found is there's not a lot of scientific evidence showing that a gluten-free diet is healthy in the first place. And what they found was there's more evidence proving that if you do not have a gluten intolerance issue and you eat gluten-free, you're cutting out an important part of your diet, and there could be serious negative side effects. You can have negative health implications if you try to go gluten-free if you don't have a gluten problem. So I guess the takeaway for that is to what the slide says: leave gluten-free for the gluten intolerant. If you have a gluten intolerance, gluten-free is the best thing for you. Those people thrive under it because their body isn't attacking itself. And that's a quick summary of what life is like with a gluten problem. We've quickly looked at a gluten intolerance today. 10 minutes is not a lot of time, but I hope I've painted a better picture of what a gluten intolerance is, what are the symptoms, the hard facts, and how these people go through their daily lives, and what are the implications of gluten-free diets, what are the implications of these gluten disabilities. I hope I painted a better picture of this, and we all have a better understanding of gluten intolerance. Thank you.